Hey, I'm Swedge, and welcome to my build guide. This is an off-meta Chronomancer build that turns Recoup into a first-class defensive layer, not just for mitigating hits, but for converting them into actual recovery. And with Fireflower, we can trigger that recovery ourselves, without even needing to take damage from enemies. Flameblast is our main skill, cast repeatedly thanks to Chrono's cooldown resets, while Firestorm handles screen-wide clearing during mapping. The build relies on a few very accessible uniques. Sacrosanctum and its Series Disdain form our energy shield based recoup setup. Midnight Braid uses this recoup to give us all the mana we'd ever need. And Fireflower not only boosts the level of our fire spell gems, but also causes lots of small self hits whenever we ignite an enemy. So unlike other Chronomancer recoup setups that require being hit by the enemy to be able to sustain, we can sustain just by setting the whole screen on fire. And if you've been finding the Waystone affix that subjects players to temporal chains to be really annoying recently, well, it's time to turn that back on the enemy. With Chrono's Apex of the Moment and temporal chains stacking together, all enemies around you will move and attack at a snail's pace. So, first let's take a look at how this recoup setup works. I'm running 105% life recoup. That's 90% from the tree, plus 15% from taut or loose flesh, assuming I'm not taking chaos damage. With Sacrosanctum, that life recoup applies fully to energy shield, giving me 105% ES recoup. I get another 3% from glazed flesh, and 15% increased recovery rate from soul bloom, bringing the total to 124% effective ES recoup. So any hit I take, including self hits, gives me back more than the damage I take. But that's not the end of the story, especially when you factor in the energy shield bypass we're running. Let's take a look at what happens when our Fireflower procs. Each one deals 136 fire damage, reduced to 34 after a capped res. With 15% energy shield bypass, 10% from that Series Disdain, and 5% from the heavy buffer tree passive, only 29 damage actually hits the energy shield. Thanks to our 124% effective ES recoup, we recover 42 energy shield from that hit. That's 145% of the damage we took, giving us a net gain of 13 energy shield per ignite. And with Flame Wall and Incinerate igniting enemies constantly, this adds up really fast, turning their own casting into a reliable and scalable recovery engine. Now let's talk a little bit about the Chrono Ascendancy. So in this setup we run 50% of our points devoted to defensive setup and 50% to offensive setup. So the Rapid River is of course what helps the recoup actually become a premier defensive layer. Now getting recoup down from 8 seconds to 4 seconds is absolutely huge. I have a little graph here simulating a player with 3k life taking 1000 damage every second, and you can see that in the default 8 seconds it doesn't go so well for them. They die fairly quickly. But the player with a recoup for 4 seconds manages to actually sustain through the hits. Now, you might think that 4 seconds down from 8 seconds is pretty good and 3 seconds is, probably reaching the point of diminishing returns, but that's not really the case. As you can see, when you pick up pliable flesh and bring that down to 3 seconds, your life in this simulation bottoms out at around 1000 life as opposed to 500 for the 4 seconds. So looking at it from a certain perspective, it's literally twice as good. So the other defensive utility that we use here is Apex of the Moment. As we talked about in the intro, this combines with temporal chains in a really great way, so that all enemies are slowed down to 60% of their action and move speed. So they attack 40% slower, they move 40% slower. If you've seen how annoying this is when you're afflicted by it in maps, it feels so comfy when all the enemies are afflicted by this, and this still affects unique bosses for 50% of the magnitude, so you're getting unique bosses to move at 80% speed, which really feels good, especially when you have to do a little bit of setup on the single target. As for the offensive part of this, we use Now and Again, which has where skills have a 33% chance not to consume a cooldown when used, and Time Snap, which is a unique skill to the Chronomancer where you reset the cooldowns of your other skills on a 32-second cooldown, and this is a great target for using the cooldown support gem. So yeah, let's have a look at the gems now. Now, we just talked about Time Snap. So Flameblast in patch 0.2 has a rather unfortunate nerf. Its damage went up, but it got this really unwieldy 15-second cooldown time. Now, Chrono becomes probably the only ascendancy in the game that can functionally use this now. So the setup we have right now is Time Snap with Ingenuity for 30% increased cooldown recovery rate, and Unbreakable, which prevents us from getting heavy stunned using this, because you really don't want to get heavy stunned while using this, because you waste the cooldown, and then you just sit around waiting for your cooldowns to come off, which is awful. And then Flame Blast uses Second Wind to give it 2 charges. I've seen some people try and invert these, but you can run basic simulations of this that show that this is by far superior to inverting these setups here. We can see these on the graphs, whereby you're talking a difference between around 7.5 mean casts of Flame Blast with this setup before your cooldowns, before you go on cooldown, versus only around 5 when you have the setup inverted. So this is definitely what I'd recommend. As for the other Flame Blast gems, we use Deliberation to support it, just because the cast time is so quick on this, we're not really moving much. You can kind of see when we have a Flame Orb here, it doesn't take long for the charge to get to full, so this is just pretty unambiguous upside. We also use Controlled Destruction because we're not a crit build. You could maybe take this to crit to really scale the damage, and I think that's what you might have to do to go to the super end game. But for right now, this is perfectly sufficient to farm T15s really comfortably. And then we also use Fire Mastery for +1 to fire skills. This is just an unambiguous upside for us. There are other gems here that could do more damage, but this is just really comfy. The downside that usually comes with this, the mana cost, is totally obviated by the fact that we are recouping so much mana constantly. So yeah, when you're single targeting, you're going to support this with Flammability Curse. We're supporting this with Hexbloom just on the rare occasion we cast this when mapping. It's nice to get it to spread, to get a bit more bonus out of it, and Inspiration just to keep the cost down, although it's still very expensive. But again, we don't really worry about the mana. You can see on the footage that I showed earlier, when I'm mapping, my mana is constantly topped off. It's great, really comfy. And then we also pair this with Incinerate. Incinerate is able to inflict fire exposure, which stacks with the elemental reduction from your curse, and both can take the enemy's elemental defense negative. We paired this with Persistence to make it last longer, Strip Away to make the exposure better, so it goes up to 60%, and Mobility, because Incinerate really slows you down, and if you're using this on bosses, you want to be able to reposition a little bit to dodge mechanics while you're doing that. There is one thing to note, because we're also running Temporal Chains, we need to pick up Whispers of Doom. So this double activation delay might be a bad thing for some setups, but for us it's actually pretty good, because this way you can cast your curse, it has a long activation time, but then you can get the fire exposure on the boss round about the same time that the curse pops. So this syncs up the curse and the fire exposure really nicely, which then lets you pop down your Flame Orb and just start casting this. And we have faster ignites, so roughly every 3 seconds or so you cast a new one, keep your ignite rolling. If you get your cooldowns, you cast Time Stop. You can see the Time Stop didn't even go on cooldown for me, so let's just as a little test here, keep going. Still not having to press Time Stop again. There we go, we have to press it, that's gone on cooldown. Just did this a little more quickly now. Yeah, so there we go, we got, how many was that, 7 or 8? I wasn't counting. But we got a lot of uses there before it went on cooldown, and ideally when you're fighting a boss, you're spacing these out a bit, you're letting the ignites roll to really get the damage off. So yeah, perfectly adequate with the cooldown resets. It lets you actually use Flameblast as a proper single target tool. Then for mapping, we augment this with Flame Wall and Firestorm. Our Flame Wall setup uses Fortress to produce these circles, and then Spell Cascade to produce 3 in a random axis. And then we use Arcane Tempo just because we were running around quite a lot. It's nice to get this off quickly to not slow us down too much. And then that sets enemies on fire constantly, which procs our Fireflower, which gives us lots of nice sustain. and it also gives us lots of ignites for Firestorm to consume. Firestorm is, I think, kind of an underrated skill this patch. When I first tried using it, when I unlocked it in the campaign, it felt awful. But I think the trick with Firestorm is that the improved bolts are so good already, they do so much damage when Firestorm consumes an ignite, and for every ignite it consumes it produces 5 of these improved bolts. So that's really strong. You don't actually need to boost its damage that much. What you do want to do with Firestorm is concentrate those bolts as much as possible, both in terms of space and time. So how we do that is to use Fast Forward for 30% less skill effect duration, and Overabundance, which gives us 50% less, but then we also get this +1 limit so that we can cast a couple of them as we're mapping to kill different packs. It's quite comfy. Then Concentrated Effect is used here. It's just unambiguous upside for us because we want this to be concentrated. And we get tons more area damage, so yeah. This means that like when you cast this on a blue pack, it melts. When you cast this on a yellow, if it's fueled by a lot of ignites ticking on mobs around it, it melts. It feels really satisfying. And then even if you have an isolated rare enemy that you can only have one ignite to consume here, Firestorm might not be the quickest, you can still just pop down a Flameblast, pop down a Solar Orb and Flameblast it, yeah. It feels very strong. So, let's have a deeper look at the tree. The somewhat annoying thing about running a Recoup setup like this is that you need all of the Recoup on the tree. Because of course we are running Fireflower in our amulet slot. That is the only place where you can normally get life Recoup, and you can get 24% life Recoup on it, which is really powerful. But we can't get that, so in order to hit our breakpoints, we need to hit every single Recoup cluster on the tree. The worst defender by far out here is Pliable Flesh, but unfortunately this is probably the best Recoup passive on the entire tree. As we saw in that sim earlier, Recoup is so much stronger with increasing returns the shorter you get it, so we absolutely have to take this. But the nice thing about Fire and Elemental is that, somewhat proximate to the Recoup stuff, there's some pretty good passives we can take. So we can pick up things like Echoing Flames and All Natural for elemental damage. We can hit these clusters up here for Burnout and Volcanic Skin, both very powerful. We can hit a lot of Energy Shield passives on the tree, which is really cozy. The nice thing about this build is that we don't care about recharge rate, and we do not care about Energy Shield recharge delay. So we can just ignore all of those nodes and take purely heavy nodes like Melding for 40% increased maximum Energy Shield, and Patient Barrier for 60% increased maximum Energy Shield for a downside we don't care about at all. We also take a few nodes to give additional Ailment Threshold and Stun Threshold, because we are a build that channels Flameblast even for a very short amount of time. If there's a lot of mobs around, you don't want to get stunned out of it, it's really tilting. So we take Eldritch Will up here, and we take Hallowed here. And this is especially nice because it also gives us Ailment Threshold, and damage over time is the enemy of a build like this. You know, Recoup only works against hit damage. If you're taking damage over time, that's a bad time. So Ailment Threshold really helps there. With regards to the jewels on the tree, these are the non-negotiable here is 3% of damage taken recouped as life. Fortunately, a lot of other builds, if they roll this, will consider the jewel pretty bricked. So every single jewel on this tree I bought for 1 or 2 exalts. Yeah, so you can get generic spell damage increase, generic elemental damage increase, or cast speed. They're what you're really wanting here. The cast speed feels really, really good, which is why we spec into it a little bit down here with practice signs. I think late game, so I'm level 87 just now, so I don't have too many more points. I'm thinking of pathing out here as a calibration, and then I'm either going to go for Reinforced Barrier down here, which just gives it a bit more armor to make smaller physical hits build up a little less quickly. Or we go down here for Sigil of Fire and Burning Nature, just to give us a little bit more damage to help blast down the bosses quicker. But yeah, that's the tree. And just a quick look at the gear that we run here. So we've already covered the 4 uniques that we use: at series disdain, damage taken bypasses energy shield, and gain maximum life is extra maximum energy shield. This is really huge for the energy shield. If I take this off, I lose over 1,000. So that's very, very strong. Sacrosanctum, obviously non-negotiable. The nice thing about Sacrosanctum is that for a unique chest, it's actually pretty good in terms of base defenses and in terms of the affixes it brings to the table. It gives you strength, it gives you intelligence, you need both of those. It gives you chaos res, which is fantastic, and damage taken recouped his life, and spirit. And it also has a fairly high base armor and energy shield. So you're not totally sacrificing your defenses in your chest, although of course it's nowhere near the energy shield you would get from a proper energy shield rare. We already covered the Fireflower. Fireflower it's an interesting one because this +4 on a really high roll. So if you use the breach materials to give this 20% quality from fire modifiers, then and you get a very lucky corrupt, this +4 can go all the way up to +6. Which would be, very, very huge for damage. But those are tremendously expensive. Even the +5s run multiple divines, so yeah. Right now I'm just anointing with conservative casting. This just gives increased mana regeneration rate and reduced mana cost of skills, which helps out a little bit when you're spamming Flameblast. It's not super necessary, you might be able to change this late game, but it's a nice cheap anoint because I'm running on a relative budget here. We run armor and energy shield pieces pretty much everywhere we can, apart from the helmet, of course, which is spoken for. Just that little bit of armor helps against the smaller hits. Armor is notoriously a little bit useless in Path of Exile 2 for anything above like a moderate hit, but when you're taking lots of small hits and you want to stagger out the damage just enough so that your Recoup can kick in, actually a little bit of armor is really useful. So you really want, because of the passive on that series disdain, where your max life converts to energy shield, you really, really want life rolls. And of course, because this is a dual recoup strategy, having a big life is just advantageous in of itself. So you want those kind of rolls on your boots and your rings. They cover resistances. If you can get fire damage and cast speed on your rings and a bit of chaos resistance is super vital. I am running 57% right now and I hate it because of course chaos damage in PoE2 does double damage to energy shield, and we are a build that really relies on our energy shield to sustain when we're mapping, so I want to get this capped ASAP. For the wand, you're looking for extra damage as fire, generic damage increases, and then ideally +5 to level of all fire spell skills. I'm just using +5 because I bought this on a budget, but this already feels pretty good. It has, cast speed and chance to ignite, very strong. For the focus, I would love to get more energy shield in this focus. I'm missing out on a huge amount here, but the key thing here is that you want to get +2 to level of all spell skills and increased fire damage. You want really good rolls on both of those to scale your damage. The gear is relatively simple. Just get cast speed, resistances, max life, fire damage, spell damage. It's all good. So just to finish off here, some tips while mapping. Mapping kind of looks like this. You want to put down your flame walls. That produces tons of ignites, really stacks up your Recoup. And then you are, with a very small spacing, you're casting Firestorm, and you can see that this rare just melted under the improved bolts from all of these different ignites. There were fewer normal enemies in the area to produce ignite, so I just used Flameblast to kill this guy nice and quick. You can see you want to be, while you're mapping, you ideally want to be setting a lot of enemies on fire continuously to keep this Recoup banked up. Because that's the really great thing about the Fireflower in this setup, right? If you don't, Recoup is best in this kind of setup when you're taking lots and lots and lots of small hits. And without Fireflower, when you run into a new pack, you don't have any Recoup banked up. And if you take just a few big hits before that Recoup really gets rolling, you're in danger. You're in a lot of danger, very easy to die. I die a lot less with the Fireflower setup than I did beforehand, because as I'm approaching a pack, I'm setting it on fire, I'm getting my Recoup rolling to begin with. So that feels very, very safe when you're mapping like this. And you can see as well that from the Midnight Braid, even though we're spamming like level 29, level 30 spells, with zero mana investment on the tree, well, almost zero, we are not having any issues with mana whatsoever. 50% damage taken, recoup his life, well, 53, there's an extra 3% in the tree, feels really, really strong. And just a little bit of footage to close off the vid, showing you what a boss encounter looks like. You start by getting your flammability down, and then you use Incinerate to put down the fire exposure, drop a solar orb, and you cast your Flameblast from it. And you can see here the damage. This is a T15 irradiated. This is very, very respectable damage. And that boss didn't last long at all. Just one last thing to note is that if you are ascending with this build for leveling, you're probably going to have a bad time. The build really needs 3 ascendancies to properly come online. So what you're probably better off doing is doing what I did and taking the defensive ascendancies first and using some kind of chaos build to level with. The chaos builds are performing really well right now, the skills are pretty strong. I just personally didn't like the playstyle very much, which is why I wanted to try and make fire work, and I'm glad I did because I'm having so much more fun with this. So yeah, that's the build. I'll be keeping a Mobalytics guide link and a Path of Building link down in the description for the video. And yeah, let me know what you think of it. If you try it out and you figure out any kind of way to improve it, let me know. I'd absolutely love to hear it. Well, thanks for watching.